The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2298. The Chief Clerk will report the bill.
Senate File number 2298, number 4 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to housing.
There are amendments at the desk. If there is no objection, we'll let the author explain the bill before we act upon the amendments. Seeing no objection, I recognize the member from Itasca, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. In front of us today, we have the housing budget bill. Before I get into the bill, I want to make sure I thank everyone that was a part of putting this bill together. First, I want to thank my co-chair, Chair Howard. It was great working with you on this bill. I think we put together a really good bill that I'll be going over here today. Thank you to both the vice chairs and thank you to the members of the committee. We had a really great discussion in the committee, but most importantly, I want to thank our staff, our CAs, Garrick Spenwin and Benji Brinks, our CLAs, Betsy Ritzer and Samya Kanan, our researchers, Luke LeBrun and Molly Peterson, nonpartisan research, Justin Cope and Mary Davis, nonpartisan fiscal, Katrina Harimark, and of course, our pages. The bill in front of us today really focuses on the three major pillars that we talked a lot about in housing, which was in having affordability, diversity, and stability for housing. When we set out in this committee, we wanted to make sure that we brought those things to discussion, and us as a committee, we had a really good committee talking about those things. Something I think I'm proud of, I think all of our housing committee members are really proud of, is that we came into the room and made housing a nonpartisan issue. We shared opinions from both sides of the aisle, but never once did the issue ever feel like it was red versus blue. It was a committee where we really wanted to lift up the issue that is a top 3 issue for every Minnesotan, and that is fixing this housing crisis that we are in. You know, it's going to be talked about a lot today on this bill. We are in a housing shortage of 107,000 units. The average mortgage is over $2,500. The average age of buying your first home is 38 years old, and we have some of the most expensive median home prices in the entire country, and for sure in the Midwest. So that's why the bill in front of us today, we are very fortunate to be given a positive target, which shows this chamber's commitment to fixing the housing crisis. The bill in front of us today takes good steps at addressing not only brick and mortar investments in infrastructure, not only just in greater Minnesota, but across the entire state, investing in the greater Minnesota housing infrastructure and workforce. It also invests in the Challenge program. It also makes sure to invest in FHPAP, the proven way of keeping families in their homes if they're facing a homelessness problem and crisis. And that's what's so great about this bill, is that we look at the whole spectrum of making sure of taking care of people when they're looking to buy a home or finding a home, but also making sure to take care of people when they're trying to take that next step or when they have fallen down and need that hand up. And that's what's so great about the bill in front of us today. Again, we're making good investments all across the board and came together in a way that's really going to lift up a lot of Minnesotans and do a lot of good. But with that, I will let my co-chair say some words, and then we can go to amendments.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. I, too, want to start with thank yous. First to my co-chair, Spencer Igo. You know, when we saw the release of information about who is chairing which committee, and I saw Representative Igo's name, I thought to myself, we've served together for many years, but I'm not sure we've actually had a conversation. We had never served on the same committee together and hadn't really had a chance to work together, and I've really appreciated the chance to get to know you and to work in partnership on a really strong bill that's going to make a difference in housing border to border. Would echo the thanks to staff on both sides, both nonpartisan and partisan, but want to offer some special thanks to our housing team on the House DFL side. Our CA, Benji Brinks, our first-time CA, really kept us moving in line. Our Molly Peterson, our amazing researcher, and CLA, Somya Kanan. We had such a great housing team, and this bill is a testament to that. For my comments, I want to just share some numbers to set the stage about the challenge we're up against and how we're making a difference in this bill. The first number is 38. That's the average age of a first-time homeowner in this state, and it's the highest number we've seen in our country's history. 500,000, that is the price point, $5,000 and up, which represents the largest decile of homes that are sold in the state of Minnesota. And again, that's for the first time ever that the most The largest group of homes sold in this state are more than $500,000. 690,000. That's the number of Minnesotans that are cost burdened in the state of Minnesota, meaning they're paying more than 30% of their income in housing, and they're one bad break away from a housing crisis. This one is a particularly important one for all of us. 15,000, that's the number of children that experience homelessness in Minnesota on any given night last year in 2024, and that's a 33% increase over the year before. And underlying all this, 104,000. That's the homes we're short. That's our housing shortage and underlying all of the challenges that Minnesotans are facing with the costs and access to housing. But now I want to read some encouraging numbers that are based in this bill. 20,000. That's the number of Minnesotans that will be able to stay safe in their home and be prevented from experiencing homelessness due to the $30 million in emergency rental assistance that's included in this bill. Between our challenge and workforce housing program, we will be able to build more than 400 new affordable single-family homes across the state. 11,029. That's the number of new rental units we'll be able to build specifically in Greater Minnesota with the investment in our Greater Minnesota Workforce Housing Program in this bill. And 100 million. That's the number we're able to finance in housing infrastructure bonds, which will create thousands of affordable homes both to own and to rent. And but for that public investment, these affordable homes would not be able to be developed. And so this is a really strong bill. And the last thank you I want to thank is to the people of Minnesota. As Representative Igo mentioned, this wasn't a very partisan issue in our committee. And I believe that's a testament to Minnesotans, because whether you are in a blue district or a red district, our constituents, Minnesotans, are telling us the same thing. They're saying that the cost of housing is just too damn high. And we are, this bill is a reflection of what Minnesotans are telling us, and I look forward to the debate and hopefully a green vote as we move forward on this bill today.
There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Howard moves to amend Senate File Number 2298, the unofficial engrossment. The amendment is coded A6.
I recognize the author of the amendment, the member from Hennepin, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk about the underlying provision in which this amendment is brought. And the underlying provision in this bill, this amendment is dealing with, is a creative approach that recognizes what is fundamentally true, is that we need new solutions if we're going to address our massive housing shortage. This provision would take a small step in that direction by incentivizing communities to adopt policies that would reduce barriers to build more homes, especially the kinds of homes that Minnesotans desperately want, ones that are affordable, both to own and to rent. And so how this would work is that when a project goes out for funding in a competitive grant with Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, they could acquire additional scoring points if that development resides in a city that adopts any of a menu of pro-housing supply local policies. Cities wouldn't be compelled to adopt any of those policies, but this would provide a carrot, an incentive if they do, to provide a slight scoring boost to help dollars flow into those communities with affordable housing developments. We took testimony on this provision in our housing omnibus bill and continued to engage both with members and city stakeholders, and this amendment reflects those discussions. We've added clarity to the provision that caps the amount of points that this incentive can earn to no more than 5% of total points in the scoring system. It also reduces some of the density, housing density, required to achieve points on a few of the menu items. We've added a few new menu items at request of city groups, including the presence of an inclusionary zoning policy. And we've clarified that this would be forward-looking, meaning that for all existing competitive grants, this scoring change wouldn't apply. It would only be for those looking forward into the future. With these changes, I'm happy to report that all of the city groups that we've engaged in are neutral on this provision and supportive of the bill, and you'll have a letter from several of those organizations on your desk that reflect that. I believe that, and thank you to those groups that engaged in this issue and helped us, I think, improve this amendment. And with that, I stand any questions. I would encourage a yes vote.
I recognize the member from my task, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My co-chair did a great job explaining this amendment. This amendment came through a lot of due diligence and work, working not only with members of this body, but also the multiple different groups that have a vested interest in trying to be dynamic and find new ways to expand housing in our state. So it's a good amendment. I would encourage the entire chamber's support to the amendment.
Any further discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Zalesnikar moves to amend Senate File Number 2298, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A3.
I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this is a simple amendment, and Representative Cleavorn and I both were on the Aging Task Force, and this amendment simply is a voice for seniors. That was one of the things we heard loud and clear on the task force, is that seniors felt that they often were forgotten when there were task force with issues that affected them. And when we have a large aging population in the state of Minnesota that is very interested in housing for their next step too, I think it's important that we add one senior for the task force in this bill. I urge you to vote yes. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Zalesnikar. This is a really good amendment, and I encourage a yes vote.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The chief clerk will report the amendment.
Zalesnikar moves to amend Senate File Number 2298, the unofficial engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A5.
I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
The A5 amendment is something that many of you heard about in committee. It was about a Minnesota Nice Housing Initiative, a pilot project to fund home sharing. Many states do this, where seniors could rent out in a room in their home. It was a pilot project for Lake County and St. Louis County. St. Louis County is the largest county of 87 in the state. And then we would have a greater Minnesota, smaller county, Lake County, and then Washington County. And the reason those counties were selected is I went to a bipartisan housing conference with Senate and House members, and the member from Washington County was there from the Senate, and so we included that in the bill so that we would have a sample of both. And having talked to both of the chairs, I know that they share the same priorities, so I want to let them continue the discussion. I will withdraw the amendment. Thank you.
Representative Zalesnikar withdraws the amendment. There are no further amendments at the desk. The chief clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, Senate File Number 2298 as amended.
Third reading. Any further discussion? I recognize the member from Carver, Representative Nash.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. I've been working on housing for a long, long time, and I appreciate what we have in this bill. It is a step forward. But I'm a little disappointed. I have pushed and pushed and pushed, and I have talked about a lot of the things that you've heard me talk about in the past. And I want you to focus on the power of the meaning of the word home. And I've said that before. Home is a very powerful word. When you've had a long day here, what is it you look forward to doing? Going home. When you are an excited first-time home buyer, you get to purchase and occupy your home. It's a physical place on the landscape, but it is more than that. It is where you grow your family. My wife and I have 6 children, and we have been blessed to have our children in our home. And it means something. It means so much that I've told you in the past about the story of my son David, who is in the Navy. Yes, Davy is still in the Navy and probably will be for life. But David was deployed somewhere that he can't tell me where he was, and they were doing things where they were exchanging hostilities. And he said, "Dad, I looked up in the sky and I saw the North Star, and I knew that I could navigate to our home in Waconia, a fixed place on the landscape, just by following the North Star. And I've shared this a lot of times, but housing is a North Star issue for young people and all people in our state, in our country. You have the ability to find that fixed place on the face of the earth, and we all have one because we all represent different places. In that home, you are allowed to invest in your community, and your community invests in you. You grow stable children, you grow stable families, and you add to a stable community, and you make that community better. But we're missing the boat on that today because we've not done everything that we can do. There are great barriers to entry for a first-time homeowner. Now, this last weekend, my daughter Hannah was down, and she brought a boyfriend that both her mom and I now approve of. I didn't have to introduce him to my shovel collection. I'll let you think through that, because we like him. Now, where this goes, I have no idea with him, but I did some research, and if my daughter and her boyfriend were to ever get married, and that's way ahead of the game, but if they were, they could not afford a house in Carver County. They just couldn't. For the simple reason that we are not building enough starter home stock. As Chair Igo pointed out, we're 107,000 housing units undersupplied. And we have tried and tried and tried to remove a lot of different barriers. But one of the main barriers that still exists is regulatory reform. And we have tried and tried and tried, and the naysayers have said no, more, and creative ways, and loudly, and a lot of people are listening, and they fear for what could happen, and they clutch their pearls in fear, and they don't want to see what might happen. But members, I will tell you, a lot of the regulatory reform is being conducted in blue states and red states alike, quite successfully. That the changes that we have been trying to make, that we sadly have not been able to get done, have been carried out in crazy conservative areas and crazy liberal areas alike. And the question that I'll answer for you is, when you ask why, is because they recognize that something has to get done, and funding isn't the only way we're out of it. We have to have regulatory reform. So I'm voting yes on this bill. I'm supportive of this bill. I commend Chair Igo and Chair Howard for getting this done. We had a really good committee where all of us said, we have a problem, we've got to fix this, it's on us. But the solution is on us collectively here at the legislature. Naysaying doesn't solve anything, my friends. We have to own the responsibility that we have as policymakers to do something much in the way that President Reagan did, and his Congress, the Congress that was there at the time came along for the ride. Tip O'Neill, Speaker of the House, also helped with creating regulatory reform. Ronald Reagan, Republican, Tip O'Neill, Democrat, they came together to figure out how to change the landscape. And here's where we are today. Fast forward to 2025. We need more regulatory reform. Simple things like aesthetic mandates that I have been pushing for years continually get shot down. Some of the densification that we would like to see so that we can build those starter homes has to happen, or we're never going to get out of this problem, ever. It's just going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And the net effect of that is that you won't be able to build workforce housing either in the cities or all the way up in Representative Burkle's district, where they are begging for workforce housing, because we can't. So I enjoy serving on this committee. We tackle a lot of heavy issues. I'm glad to see that we are recognizing that we need to move the ball, and we've moved the ball a little, but I just feel like there's more to go. And I really wish that we could do something more meaningful so that we could change the landscape of what's going on. And as you've seen, if you've done some even precursory investigation of the states that I've talked about that have made those regulatory changes, nothing bad has happened. Economies are flourishing. Jobs are being filled. Young homeowners are plunking down cash and creating that North Star promise for themselves so that they can find their way home. And I said in a press conference when we started this that housing is a North Star issue, and everyone deserves to be able to navigate their way home. We've taken some small steps. We've got a long way to go. But I encourage your green vote on this because this is a good first step. Thank you, members.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Howard and Igo, for bringing this bill. I think, as you both probably know, I wish there would be a little bit more things in here so we could help build more housing. And honestly, thank you, Representative Nash, for your comments. Something I want to speak about along those lines is, not everyone's first home is just the regular single-family starter home. The way that I was able to buy a home and make it affordable to myself and my husband was to buy a triplex. And I just wanted to make that known. I'm maybe one of the younger members of this body, and it was mentioned how high the first-time homebuyer age is. And I'll say, because we bought that triplex, we were able to save to then actually build a home behind our home. So we built an accessory dwelling unit. So we added another unit of housing in our community. And I think about the ways that we can continue to add and the ways that we can continue to welcome more people to our communities. And I just hope that we can continue to build on this work so that we can have more opportunities for people like me and my friends who are having a hard time finding homes to purchase, but also wanting to build our own way in this world. So thank you.
I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Scraba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Jones, I had a different speech all ready to go, and then I started thinking about what you said. And I think about when I was growing up in Ely, Minnesota, and the homes, the stock that was there, and the people that I grew up with. They were buying 1910 homes, 1930 homes, and they were, 600 square feet. And that was their home, and they could afford that. Now what we have, a house like that, and it depends where it is, it's out of their reach. They have to be entrepreneurs like you if you want to do that. We can do better. We should do better. I commend Representative Howard and Representative Igo for working together. This is my third. I'm on 4 committees. This is my 3rd committee, so I get to work together with other side. And this is we have to keep working together to solve this housing problem. It isn't a partisan problem, and Representative Nash is trying to pound that into our head. It's not a partisan problem. We got to quit making it a partisan problem. It's a math problem, and if we all work together, we can have more people in our communities so we can have better lives for everyone. I mean, it's an easy vote for me. It's a yes vote, and I encourage other people to vote green. Thank you. Thank you guys for all the work you did and for all the committee staff. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Momani Hildsley.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker and members of the House. Today I rise in strong support of House File 2298, and in particular the critical funding it provides for the Family Homelessness Prevention Assistance Program, also known as FHPAP. I want to begin by recognizing the work of the committee. I think as a first-timer, I was very fortunate to be a part of a committee that really talked about bipartisan work. And seeing Igo and seeing Chair Howard work together and really be partners in this work was refreshing. And so I want to thank, the chairs and also the committee members as well. Also recognize the community members, advocates across Minnesota who helped bring this bill to life. Their stories, their struggles, their unwavering belief in the power of prevention are what have carried this effort forward. And also, I have to, just say that it has been just an honor to work on this bill. So this bill reflects our responsibility as legislators to invest in accessible, affordable, sustainable, and equitable housing. That's not a slogan. That's just our mandate. Because of the heart of this bill, there's one goal: to make sure that Minnesota families don't fall into homelessness. So FHPAP is one of the most effective tools we have to prevent that from happening. It provides emergency rental, mortgage, utility assistance for families facing housing crisis, and it does so with compassion, flexibility, and strong local partnerships. This is not just a policy program, this is a lifeline for many families here in the state of Minnesota. In my district and beyond, families are doing everything right, but one lost paycheck, one emergency expense, and one medical bill can put them at risk of eviction. We cannot keep asking people to wait until they are unhoused before we act. We know prevention works. It costs about $3,500 to keep a family housed through FHPAP, compared to $45,000 to help them recover once they've lost their home. And so I say to my colleagues, this is our moment to lead, to govern with both compassion and common sense, to say clearly that in Minnesota, we act before a crisis, not after. That we don't just talk about values, we fund them. I respectfully ask you for your green vote on House File 2298. Let's choose prevention, let's choose people, and like Representative Nash said in his statement, let's make sure that every Minnesotan has a place to call home. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Carlton, Representative Dotseth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. You know, a good friend of mine once asked me, he said, Jeff, how do you eat a hippopotamus? The answer is one bite at a time. How do we solve the housing crisis? One bite at a time. This is a really great start to actually start focusing on solving the housing crisis. I have to say it's been an honor to actually serve on this committee with both chairs. You can see how working together with collaboration and have the end game in mind, you get good results. This is what good legislation actually looks like. I have to thank our members of our team as well. It was actually always an honor to work on housing. The comment came up earlier, we look at the average age of a home buyer is 38 years old. You know, I'm fortunate enough when I wasn't going to share this story, but hearing the testimony over there with when your first home was a triplex. My first home, I was 18 years old. I grew up in the building trades. And I was actually fortunate enough to actually pull a building permit at 18 years old, completed my home when I was 19 years old. That's unheard of now in the new generation. However, with that, I'll say that interest rates were 14% as well. But house prices were much less. So there's a big difference there. There's a lot of factors. So we can look at what's going on over the past 4 years where we've seen interest rates go up. But you have to look at out-of-the-box thinking. And this is what this committee had done, is looked at out of the box. As you can tell, I'm going to speak in favor of this bill today. A couple highlights on this bill. Maybe I'm going to also pull back and say the collaboration, bringing in all the stakeholders was important. Because when this bill first started out, you heard a lot of different opposition, I'll just say it, to the bill. Because people didn't understand the bill and what language was in the bill. But what happened is we actually brought in all the stakeholders. When I say we, the chairs brought in all the stakeholders and actually had reasonable conversation, came up with legislation that actually works. With this bill, we've got a record $30 million dedicated to greater Minnesota infrastructure and workforce housing projects. That's a major win. With this bill, we've got $10 million secured for the Challenge Program to support construction and renovation across the state, and it's open to all applicants. That's a win. $4 million dedicated to manufactured home parks, infrastructure grants, and expand housing growing communities. Again, thinking out of the box, it's another source of housing. No new landlord-tenant policy changes included in avoiding additional mandates to housing providers. We lighten up the load on some of the housing providers, and we realize that that's what had to happen. That's a win. Majority of rental assistance funding directed towards family homelessness prevention. This is mostly one of the bigger issues that were requested from some of our counties. Major investments prioritized in infrastructure. Roads, sewers, construction to boost home building capacity. That's a win. Approximately $200 million in total funding secured for housing production, renovation, infrastructure statewide. I'd say that's a win. Removal of certain income restrictions from key programs, broadening access for more builders and families. That's a win. $100 million allocated for housing infrastructure bonds with a near 50-50 split favoring Greater Minnesota. That's a win for Greater Minnesota. Relative, and of course that's relative to population count is what that's set up as. So I'll give that disclaimer there. I can see Chair Howard running the numbers in his head over there. 60% of the funding increase went to building and record amounts went towards Greater Minnesota. That's a win. We secured $20 million for Greater Minnesota infrastructure, 5 times more than last session, and $10 million for Greater Minnesota workforce housing. That's a win. There are no new programs and no new no-name grants. I believe that's a win. We stayed focused on building and infrastructure. That's a win. This bill helped us build housing stock, helps create sustainable families, which turns into commerce. That's a win. At the end of the day, we've got to look at what's best, not for political sides, but we got to look at what's the win for all of Minnesota. This is a win for Minnesota. Vote green. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Howard.
Thank you, members, for the discussion on this bill. I want to close. I mentioned a lot of thank yous, and I thank Chair Igo, but I also want to thank our entire committee. It really was a great committee. I especially want to thank my Vice Chair Kozlowski, and our Vice Chair chaired the first hearing that when I had the gavel, did so swimmingly while I was at home out sick. And we've just had such a strong team on our side, but really good discussions on both sides of the aisle. In my closing on the bill, I want to talk less about the specifics, but ask you all to, with me for a second, dream a bit. And if you want to, you can click your heels and repeat after me, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. We're now in the year 2040. Dream with me here. We're in the year 2040. This chamber probably looks a little different. Maybe there's a few of us still here, probably not a ton of us. And it looks different outside these walls as well. More than ever, our state is thriving. And it's because after years of consistent, bold action, perseverance, partnership, listening to our constituents, we have solved our state's housing shortage. I want you to think about that. Think about that future in Minnesota where we've solved our housing shortage. And in that Minnesota, people have more choices in a variety of homes when they're searching to rent or to own. Prices have leveled off too and are tacking with inflation rather than outpacing it by 2 or 3 times like has been the case for decades. For renters, this means that most renters are able to afford their home. And it means that if they catch a bad break, they're not going to be thrown into a housing crisis and experience homelessness. And they're in a better place to have upward mobility. For our prospective homeowners, it means that for that young family, maybe they are able to buy a home in the community where they want to live. Finally, teachers, nurses, police officers, firefighters, they can afford a single-family home in the community where they work. And finally, a generation of Minnesotans are once again able to buy a home in the community where they grew up. And importantly, we've eliminated one of our nation's worst racial home ownership gaps. Solving our housing shortage has even more positive ripple benefits. Since we know that the lack of an affordable home is the #1 cause of homelessness, we have drastically cut homelessness in the state of Minnesota. And because we've done that, we're spending less public dollars than ever before to support the programs needed for Minnesotans experiencing homelessness. And it also means that Minnesota has become one of the first states to functionally end children's homelessness in this country. And that's why the Department of Education has announced that Minnesota has some of the highest achieving students in the country, and our opportunity gaps are evaporating because we know that students are achieving at a higher level when they're not worried where they're going to sleep at the end of the night. We're setting the standard of addressing climate change because more people are able to live in homes near access to their near transit, near community amenities where they want to work. Businesses are thriving, especially in greater Minnesota, where we're finally able to produce the homes that support the businesses and the workforce needed from border to border. And we're experiencing in-migration because Minnesotan young people all across the country and region want to move to a state for a high quality of life and the affordable ability to live close to where they work and want to raise a family. Simply put, Minnesota is a shining light of opportunity, all because collectively we've worked hard, we've made it a priority, we've thought outside the box to solve our housing shortage. Okay, let's click our heels or snap back to reality. We're sitting here in the year 2025, and my question to this body is this future possible? And I will tell you with every fiber in my being, I believe it to be true, that we can build this future in Minnesota. We have the power to collaborate, to be creative, to challenge the status quo, to dare to dream what is possible. If we do that, if we listen to the people, our powerful people who are demanding that we take action to make the dream of home a reality, we can build a future in Minnesota where everyone, every single Minnesotan has the ability to find a home that they can afford in a community where they want to thrive. And so as we take this final vote on the bill, if you want to click your heels a few more times and say there's no place like home, that's great. But most importantly, click your green button and vote yes for homes. And vote yes to put Minnesota on a path to becoming a place where everyone can reach the dream of an affordable home. Thank you.
I recognize the author of the bill, the representative from Itasca, Representative Igo.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, for the discussion on this bill. Again, I think everyone kind of covered just a little bit of everything there, which was really great. Again, thank you to the committee. We did put together a good bill, and there's a lot of stories there that are talked about, so it spurred my brain and got me thinking about a lot of things. But I think the first thing I wanted to say is just how a bill like this is exactly why I put my name in and filed to run for office, because this is what happens when people leave partisan politics at the door and actually work on solving an issue. You get a good bill in front of you where you get people from both sides standing up saying this is a good thing. And I'm especially proud to be carrying this bill. And I wasn't going to say it, but this is going to be my first bill to pass the House floor, so I'm really proud of that, if you guys vote green, which I hope you will. But, you know, thinking about what home really means, I mean, a home is at the pillar in the testament of who we all are as people, right? It doesn't matter who we are, where we're from, our traditions, our cultures. Home is always at the center of it. And that's why when you work on an issue like housing, and I think every member of the committee can say this, that's why it's so rewarding, because you know you're going to make a difference for somebody. And I think everyone in this room has a story of what having a home means to them. You know, whenever I think of my home, I think of the place where I asked my now wife to marry me. And that's a really powerful moment that I'll never forget. When I did that, and I can always picture that house in the background now where I asked her to do that. Now, if I'm married, happy 5 months, and it's great. But every Minnesotan should have the ability to have that experience. And that's what this bill in front of us is trying to do. But some people that spoke before me talked about the things that we still need to do, right? We need over 100,000 new homes in the state. Everyone in this chamber agrees that Minnesota is the best place to live, grow up, raise a family, all of those things. But people can't do that if they don't have homes. And that's why we need to continue to drive the message and work on policy that can get us there. And some of this policy that we've been working on and that's still actively being worked on here at the Minnesota Capitol can get us going in that direction with a zero fiscal note. And these policies are working in other states around us. And not just, states like fluke states. I mean, Florida is passing some of these things and having amazing success. Just like a state like Colorado is having amazing success. You have political leaders on both sides of the spectrum, from the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, saying the solution to fixing the housing crisis in the United States is land use and zoning reform and deregulating, to the Governor of California, Gavin Newsom, saying the exact same thing. It's a uniting issue because housing is a top 3 issue for every single person, not just in Minnesota, but in this country. So this bill is going to take us on that first step, and I really appreciated my co-chair's story because I think that is something that is really great. Let's keep driving this message home to create ways where that first generation home buyer can look at housing prices and see, I can do that, I can dream, I can buy my first home. To a senior that maybe would see a community to be developed that they could sell their larger family home and open it up for that next family and move into a more close community, tight to amenities and close to restaurants and close to shopping. To develop more multifamily options so that people can move to communities and plant roots. Because when we create this diversity in housing, right, in all these different things from multifamily to single family, large homes, small homes, starter homes, and I want to wish that this was the member of the Housing Committee's idea to do this, but it wasn't. These are proven things that have worked in the past. In fact, most of the communities in our state, they started with starter homes. Many of them were probably ordered from the Sears catalog and built up, and many of our constituents, in fact, many of us in this room might even still live in those houses. So maybe what I say is maybe it's time for that renaissance, to look at how things worked in the past and bring them back to the future. Because if we invest in those things like starter homes, we invest in things like allowing for multifamily in commercial districts, and we allow for getting the zoning out of the way that's keeping the free market and personal property rights from allowing to be the option and opening the door for what is possible. That idea that my co-chair had is possible, and Minnesota can thrive. So I appreciate all the support for this bill, and I hope we can all get a green vote on this one today. But the work's not done, and I say let's keep making sure we leave our partisan politics at the door and keep working on something that's core to who we are as people, and that's making sure there's a home for every single Minnesotan, no matter where you are, where you're from, because everyone deserves it. Thank you, members.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. The clerk will call the names of the members voting remotely.
Hussein.
Okay, go ahead.
Hussein, aye.
Hussein votes aye. McDonald.
McDonald, aye.
McDonald votes aye. Perez Vega.
Go ahead.
Perez Vega votes yes.
Perez Vega votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 106 yeas and 25 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.